The house was quiet that night in a way I hadn't noticed before. The kind of quiet that makes every small sound feel louder than it should. The refrigerator humming in the kitchen, the faint tick of the wall clock above the hallway mirror, the soft rustle of wind brushing against the trees outside our backyard. I remember standing barefoot on the cool tile floor, holding 2 mugs of tea I had just made. Steam curled slowly into the dim kitchen light. Olivia liked chamomile before bed. Always had. But that night, her mug stayed untouched. Have you ever felt that strange moment when nothing is technically wrong, yet something deep inside you whispers that your life is quietly shifting beneath your feet? Hi everyone. My name's Daniel. I'm 40 years old, an IT systems administrator for a telecommunications company. I've spent most of my life solving technical problems, network failures, server outages, security breaches. But the one system I thought was stable, my marriage, turned out to be the one thing I never knew how to debug. Olivia and I had been together 15 years. Married for 11. 2 kids, Lucas, 12, already taller than I expected at that age, and Emma, 7, still leaving glitter and crayons on every flat surface in the house. From the outside, we looked like one of those normal families people assume are solid. And for a long time, we were. Olivia was the kind of woman people noticed when she entered a room. Confident, quick with humor, always a little sharper than everyone else in the conversation. She worked as a marketing manager at a regional advertising agency downtown. Creative, ambitious, the type who could pitch an idea in a meeting and have everyone nodding before they even understood it. I admired that about her. Still did. That evening she came home later than usual. I heard the front door open softly, the quiet click of her heels on the hardwood floor. When she stepped into the kitchen, she gave me a quick smile, warm, familiar. But something in her movements felt rehearsed. Her phone stayed in her hand the whole time. The screen lit briefly while she set her purse down. A message notification flashed across it. She turned the screen away from me before I could read the name. "Long day?" I asked. "Just meetings," she said quickly. She kissed my cheek, light, almost automatic, and walked upstairs. Her phone never left her hand. At the time, I told myself it meant nothing. But that small moment, that tiny flicker of hesitation, was the first crack in something I thought was unbreakable. And I wouldn't understand how deep that crack went until months later, when a stranger sent me a photo that changed everything. At this stage of the story, the psychological tension is rooted in contrast. Daniel believes his life is stable, a long marriage, 2 children, a predictable routine, and a partner he respects. His worldview is built on the assumption that consistency equals security. The quiet domestic setting reinforces that belief: tea, family routines, and familiar evening rituals. However, subtle behavioral cues already challenge this expectation. Olivia's quick movements, her phone held tightly, the turned screen, and the slightly rehearsed tone in her voice introduce micro-signals of secrecy. Importantly, these details are small enough that Daniel rationalizes them away. This is a common psychological defense. When new information threatens a stable belief system, the mind minimizes the anomaly rather than restructuring the belief. The moment Olivia turns the phone away becomes symbolically significant. It represents the first boundary of hidden information inside the relationship. Yet Daniel does not confront it because the cost of acknowledging it would be too high emotionally. Accepting suspicion would mean accepting that the marriage might not be what he believed. Thus, the conflict begins not with proof of betrayal but with cognitive dissonance. Daniel's expectations of loyalty and normalcy clash with subtle evidence suggesting secrecy. At this early stage, denial is not weakness, it is a psychological mechanism protecting him from a reality he is not yet ready to face. Life in our house continued almost exactly the way it always had, at least on the surface. The routine of our mornings did not change much, and if someone had looked at our family from the outside, they probably would have assumed everything was perfectly normal. Every weekday began with the same small sequence of sounds. At 6:15 the coffee machine started humming quietly in the kitchen. A few minutes later Lucas appeared in the hallway with his backpack hanging from one shoulder, moving slowly like most 12-year-olds forced to wake up early. Emma usually sat at the kitchen table still half asleep, waiting impatiently for her waffles while arguing with the toaster about how brown they should be. Olivia always moved through those mornings with calm efficiency. She packed lunches, reminded Lucas about homework, brushed Emma's hair, and checked work emails at the same time. For years I had admired how naturally she managed everything. She seemed to balance work, home, and the kids without ever appearing overwhelmed. But sometime that spring, small things began to change. The changes were subtle at first. They were so small that I almost ignored them. Still, I noticed them. The first thing that caught my attention was Olivia's phone. In the past, she had never treated it like something private. She often left it on the kitchen counter while cooking or on the dining table during dinner. Sometimes Lucas even borrowed it to show me a video or a funny meme he had found. Gradually, that stopped happening. Her phone rarely left her hand anymore. If she was not holding it, it was in her pocket. If it was not in her pocket, it was placed face down on the table. At night, she started bringing it upstairs earlier than usual. At first, I told myself it was probably work. Marketing campaigns move fast, and I knew she had been managing several new clients recently. Still, one night something unusual happened. I woke up around 2 in the morning and saw a faint blue light coming from Olivia's side of the bed. The room was dark except for the glow of her phone screen. She was typing quickly. It did not look like the slow typing someone uses when writing emails. Her thumbs moved fast, pausing and starting again the way people type when they are having a back-and-forth conversation. When she noticed I was awake, she immediately locked the screen. "Couldn't sleep," she said quietly. Her voice sounded calm, but her body felt tense beside me. I nodded and turned back toward the wall. But I stayed awake much longer than she probably realized. Not long after that, the work trips started becoming more frequent. At first, it was one marketing conference in Chicago. Olivia explained that her company wanted her to attend because she was responsible for a new campaign. Then a few weeks later, she had another trip, this time to Denver. After that came a short, client workshop that lasted 2 days. Olivia had always traveled occasionally for work, but never like this. The suitcases appeared in our bedroom more often than they used to. I also noticed new clothes hanging in her closet. Dresses I had not seen before. A different perfume she said she had bought during lunch near her office. One evening she stood in front of the bedroom mirror adjusting a dark green blouse that still looked brand new. "You look nice," I told her. She gave me a small smile. "It's just a networking dinner," she said. The answer sounded normal. Still, something about the moment felt strange. When I stepped closer to her, she shifted slightly and angled the mirror away from me. It was a small movement, probably unconscious, but it made me feel like she did not want me looking too closely. I told myself I was imagining things. The kids began noticing the changes as well. One evening during dinner, Emma asked a simple question. "Mommy, why are you gone so much lately?" Olivia laughed softly and brushed Emma's hair away from her face. "Just work stuff," she said. "Nothing exciting." Emma nodded and continued eating. Lucas did not say anything. He just looked down at his plate for a moment. Something about his silence made me uncomfortable. Children often notice things adults try not to see. Around the same time, Olivia started going out more often with her friend Natalie. Natalie had been Olivia's closest friend for years. Their dinners together were normal, and I never questioned them before. But one Friday night, Olivia came home from meeting Natalie in a strangely quiet mood. She poured herself a glass of wine and stood by the kitchen window for several minutes without saying anything. "You okay?" I asked. "Just tired," she replied. Her fingers tapped lightly against the side of the glass. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. She grabbed it quickly, almost knocking over the wine. For a brief moment the screen lit up. I saw a name. Marcus. She turned the phone over immediately. "Work," she said quickly. But she said it before I even asked what the message was about. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan slowly turning above the bed. My mind kept searching for reasonable explanations. Work stress, client deadlines, travel, new projects. People get busy. People change routines. Still, the explanations felt thin. Over the following weeks, I started noticing small things that had never bothered me before. The brightness of Olivia's phone screen would drop when I entered the room. She stopped leaving it charging in the kitchen overnight. Sometimes she would glance at a message and smile quietly to herself before locking the screen. One evening, she stepped outside onto the patio to take a phone call. Through the glass door, I watched her pacing slowly across the deck. Her voice sounded soft, almost playful. When she came back inside and saw me looking, she spoke quickly. "Client problem," she said. But her shoulders remained tense for several minutes. The moment that truly unsettled me came from Lucas. It was a rainy Sunday afternoon, and he was working on a school project at the dining table. "Dad?" he said. "Yeah? Is Mom's office near the lake?" I looked up from my laptop. "No. It's downtown." "Why?" Lucas shrugged. "I think I saw her car near the lake yesterday when Kevin dropped me off." The comment sounded casual, but it made something tighten inside my chest. The lake was in the opposite direction from Olivia's office. Later that evening, I mentioned it casually while we were putting dishes away. "Lucas said he thought he saw you near the lake yesterday," I said. Olivia paused for a moment. Only for a second. "Oh," she said. "Yeah, I had a meeting with a client out there." The explanation sounded perfectly reasonable. Still, there had been that tiny pause before she answered. And when she looked away while speaking, a strange feeling settled in my chest. For the first time in 15 years, a thought crossed my mind that I had never seriously considered before. What if my wife was lying to me? In this stage of the story, the emotional tension begins to grow through a series of small behavioral changes rather than dramatic events. Olivia's actions become increasingly secretive. She holds her phone more closely, responds quickly to messages, and avoids leaving her device unattended. These actions are not direct proof of wrongdoing, but they trigger emotional reactions in Daniel that gradually shift his perception of the relationship. Daniel's emotions evolve slowly. At first, he experiences mild curiosity and confusion. He tries to explain Olivia's behavior logically, attributing the changes to work stress and professional responsibilities. This reaction reflects a natural psychological defense mechanism. When people encounter information that threatens an important relationship, they often attempt to rationalize it rather than immediately accept the possibility of betrayal. As the small details accumulate, Daniel's emotional state begins to change. The late-night texting, the sudden business trips, and the unfamiliar name on Olivia's phone all contribute to a growing sense of unease. Each observation increases his internal tension, even though he still lacks concrete proof. Lucas's innocent comment about seeing Olivia near the lake becomes a significant turning point. Children often reveal information without realizing its importance. In this case, Lucas unintentionally introduces an external contradiction to Olivia's explanation of her schedule. This moment strengthens Daniel's suspicion because it introduces evidence that does not easily fit his previous assumptions. Emotion drives action here, even if the actions remain subtle. Daniel begins paying closer attention to Olivia's behavior. He notices gestures, pauses, and changes in routine that he previously ignored. His growing awareness marks the beginning of a psychological shift from trust towards suspicion. By the end, the emotional foundation of the marriage has begun to crack. Daniel has not yet taken active steps to investigate, but the internal barrier that once prevented him from questioning Olivia is starting to break. After that conversation in the kitchen about the lake, the question stayed in my mind much longer than I wanted it to. What if Olivia had lied? At first, I tried to ignore the thought. 15 years of being with someone builds a deep instinct to trust them. You do not suddenly assume the worst about a person who has shared your life, raised children with you, and slept beside you for more than a decade. Still, the human mind works in strange ways. Once suspicion appears, it begins to reshape everything around it. Small details that once felt ordinary start to seem important. Conversations begin to sound different in memory. Even silence begins to carry meaning. Over the next several days, I started paying closer attention to Olivia's routine. I did not confront her, and I did not ask many questions. I simply observed. For years, Olivia had followed a predictable schedule. She usually left the house around 8:15 in the morning after the kids were ready for school. Most evenings she returned between 6:30 and 7 o'clock. Recently that routine had become less consistent. Some evenings she came home much later than usual. Other days she arrived earlier but immediately went upstairs, saying she needed to finish work on her laptop. Her phone was still always with her. If a message arrived during dinner, she would glance at it quickly and then turn the screen face down on the table. Once or twice I caught a brief glimpse of the lock screen before it went dark again, but never long enough to read the message or the sender's name. None of these things were proof of anything. Still, the pattern continued to bother me. Sleep gradually became more difficult. I often woke in the middle of the night and lay there staring at the ceiling. My mind would replay moments from the day. The tone of Olivia's voice. The way she paused before answering certain questions. The small gestures I had started noticing. One night around 1:30 in the morning I woke again. The bedroom was dark, but I could see the faint glow of a phone screen coming from Olivia's side of the bed. She was texting. Her thumbs moved quickly across the screen. She would type for a few seconds, stop, wait, and then start typing again. The rhythm looked familiar. It was the rhythm of a conversation. I stayed still and pretended to be asleep. After a few minutes she set the phone down and rolled slightly toward me. For a moment I thought she might notice that I was awake. But her breathing soon slowed. She had fallen asleep. I remained awake for another hour. The next morning, I experienced something I had never felt before during our entire marriage. Temptation. Olivia's phone was sitting on the kitchen counter while she helped Emma look for a sweater upstairs. I was standing only a few feet away from it. For a moment I considered picking it up. Just to check. Just to confirm whether the strange feeling in my chest was nothing more than paranoia. The phone lay there silently. The screen was dark. It was such a simple object, yet touching it felt like crossing an invisible line. Trust is a complicated thing. Even when it begins to crack, part of you still wants to protect it. I stood there for several seconds staring at the phone. Then Emma ran into the kitchen asking where her backpack was. The moment passed. And I told myself that maybe it was better that way. Later that week another small event added to my growing unease. Kevin sent me a message in the middle of the afternoon. Kevin had been my closest friend since college. We still met occasionally for lunch when our schedules allowed it. His message was short. Random question. Was Olivia supposed to be near the Lake District today? I stared at the screen for a moment before replying. Why? A minute later he responded. I think I saw her car near Harbor Drive earlier. Harbor Drive ran along the lake on the other side of town, far away from Olivia's office. I tried to keep my response casual. Maybe she had a meeting there. Kevin replied with a thumbs up emoji, and the conversation ended. But the message stayed with me. Because it was the second time someone had mentioned seeing Olivia in that area. A few days later something happened that made my suspicions stronger. Olivia asked me to help her print a document from her laptop. She had a meeting the next morning and needed the file printed before she left for work. She placed the laptop on the kitchen table and told me where the file was saved. I need to take a quick call upstairs, she said. Just print the document when you find it. I opened the file and sent it to the printer. While the pages were printing, the laptop screen dimmed slightly. Then a notification appeared in the corner. It was an email preview. The sender's name appeared clearly. Marcus. I felt my chest tighten. The message preview only showed a few words. Last night was. The rest of the sentence was hidden. A moment later the notification disappeared. I sat there staring at the screen for several seconds. My mind tried to build explanations. Maybe Marcus was a coworker. Maybe they had worked late on a project. Still, the words, "last night," kept echoing in my head. When Olivia came back downstairs, she glanced briefly at the laptop before closing it. "Everything print okay?" she asked. "Yes," I said. My voice sounded normal. But inside, something had shifted. For the first time since my suspicion began, I felt certain that something important was being hidden from me. And I knew I could not ignore it much longer. In this stage of the story, the narrative shifts from passive observation to active awareness. Daniel's suspicion has now begun influencing his behavior and perception. Earlier signs, such as late-night texting and increased privacy around Olivia's phone, created emotional discomfort but did not immediately change his actions. However, the repeated appearance of inconsistencies gradually pushes him toward investigation. The cause of Daniel's growing determination is the accumulation of small contradictions. Lucas's comment about the lake introduces the first external inconsistency. Kevin's message later reinforces that observation, confirming that Olivia has been seen in a place unrelated to her work. Each of these events strengthens Daniel's suspicion because they originate from independent sources. Another important cause and effect moment occurs when Olivia leaves her laptop open. The email notification from Marcus becomes the first semi-concrete piece of evidence. Even though the message itself is incomplete, the phrase, "last night was," implies a shared personal experience. This small fragment dramatically changes Daniel's interpretation of Olivia's previous behavior. The effect of this discovery is psychological rather than confrontational. Daniel does not immediately accuse Olivia or demand answers. Instead, his internal state changes from uncertainty to cautious awareness. He now believes that the secrecy around Olivia's phone, her frequent trips near the lake, and the late-night conversations may all be connected. This moment represents the transition from suspicion to investigation. Daniel realizes that ignoring the signs will no longer restore his peace of mind. Even without full proof, the chain of events has begun pointing toward a hidden reality he can no longer pretend does not exist. The days after the confrontation felt heavy and unreal, as if the house itself had changed. The air seemed colder, and even familiar sounds, the creak of the stairs, the hum of the dishwasher, Lucas laughing in the hallway, reminded me of what had been lost. Olivia moved through the house quietly, her voice subdued, and for the first time, I noticed how small gestures, like her lingering glances at her phone or the way she avoided sitting beside me on the couch, spoke volumes about her guilt and anxiety. I spent a lot of time alone in our bedroom at night, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the muted glow of the city lights through the curtains. Sleep came in short, restless bursts, and I found myself replaying every moment, every conversation, trying to trace where things had begun to unravel. I realized that denial had been my shield for months, and now that it had crumbled, there was no place to hide from reality. Practical matters quickly became urgent. I called Patricia Lewis, our family lawyer, and began discussing separation, custody arrangements for Lucas and Emma, and how to protect our financial stability. Each decision was painstaking, yet necessary. When I spoke with Kevin, my longtime friend, I felt both relief and sorrow. He listened without judgment, helping me clarify the steps I needed to take while providing the emotional support I desperately needed. Olivia attempted to bridge the gap between us, suggesting counseling and promising she would end the affair. I listened politely but with a detached awareness. Deep down, I knew that trust, once broken in such a fundamental way, could not simply be rebuilt with words or therapy sessions. The emotional foundation of our marriage had shifted irreversibly. I began establishing boundaries in small, symbolic ways. I started sleeping in the guest room, removed my wedding ring, and organized my personal space to reflect a life moving forward independently. I immersed myself in daily routines, helping the children with homework, taking them to activities, and finding moments of quiet reflection during early morning coffee runs or late evening walks. Slowly, the chaos in my mind began to organize itself into clarity, and a sense of agency returned. By the time I filed for divorce, I felt a mixture of grief, liberation, and resolve. The pain was undeniable, but the clarity of purpose, protecting the children, reclaiming my independence, and defining my boundaries offered a pathway forward. For the first time in years, I recognized that my life could continue with dignity and self-respect, even without the marriage I had once taken for granted. This section explores the psychological aftermath of betrayal and the deliberate process of reclaiming personal agency. Daniel experiences a combination of grief, shock, and empowerment as he navigates practical decisions and emotional boundaries. His observations of Olivia's subtle behaviors, avoidance, anxiety, and attempts at reconciliation highlight the lasting impact of guilt and secrecy in human relationships. By establishing routines and symbolic gestures of independence, he gradually reconstructs a sense of control and self-identity. The emotional evolution reflects realistic coping mechanisms, demonstrating the intricate interplay of loss, clarity, and resilience. The narrative emphasizes the balance between emotional healing and pragmatic decision-making, illustrating how betrayal forces profound personal growth and the establishment of protective boundaries for oneself and one's children. Months passed, and the house that had once felt like a battleground slowly became a place of quiet routines. Lucas and Emma adapted to the new normal with surprising resilience, their laughter gradually filling spaces that had once felt heavy with tension. I started waking earlier, taking long walks before work, feeling the cold morning air against my skin and hearing the distant hum of the city awaken. Each step reminded me that I was alive, that life continued beyond betrayal. I began rediscovering myself in ways I hadn't allowed before. I joined a local photography club, finding solace in capturing fleeting moments, the golden glow on a tree, reflections in puddles after rain, the intensity of a child's gaze. Conversations with Megan, a new acquaintance who shared my appreciation for art and literature, reminded me of connection without expectation, and slowly, I allowed myself to experience trust and curiosity again. Olivia remained in our shared life only as a co-parent. Her attempts at reconciliation became less frequent, and I no longer felt compelled to respond with emotion. The distance was no longer painful, it was protective, a boundary that allowed me to rebuild the life I wanted for myself and my children. Our conversations focused on logistics and the well-being of Lucas and Emma, not on the betrayal that had once defined every corner of our relationship. Evenings brought reflection. Sitting on the balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the city lights shimmer in the river below, I realized that betrayal had taught me an unexpected lesson. Trust can break instantly, but resilience and self-awareness allow a life to be rebuilt. I felt empowered, not because I had overcome Olivia's actions, but because I had reclaimed my sense of self, and could move forward without bitterness or dependency. The chapter of my life with Olivia had closed, but a new one had quietly begun. The boundaries I had established were not walls, they were bridges to a future shaped by conscious choices, emotional clarity, and love for the children who were now at the center of everything I valued. I understood, finally, that empowerment comes not from controlling others, but from understanding oneself. In final section emphasizes psychological recovery and personal growth after marital betrayal. Daniel's journey demonstrates the interplay of grief, acceptance, and empowerment. By redirecting attention to his children, personal routines, and new social connections, he rebuilds his identity independently of his wife's choices. The narrative illustrates the subtle processes of establishing emotional boundaries, reclaiming agency, and transforming trauma into self-awareness. Betrayal acts as a catalyst for reflection, showing how trust once lost cannot always be restored, but resilience allows for meaningful reconstruction of life. The story captures the full arc of emotional realism: initial shock, suspicion, confirmation, confrontation, and ultimate psychological liberation. It highlights the importance of deliberate action, self-respect, and cautious optimism in the aftermath of deep relational hurt, leaving the reader with a sense of closure and hope for future growth.